All right. Just looking in the Zoom room right now, it looks like Emergent Commons has taken over the STOA. So welcome, everyone. For those of you who are watching on YouTube right now, Emergent Commons is a community that was birthed from Rebel Wisdom, Rebel Wisdom, for those of you who are in the know, ended officially this weekend. And one of their gifts to the world was Emergent Commons. And it's one of the few sense-making spaces in the so-called Liminal Web with no central figures. And it's organized and managed entirely by teams of volunteers. And it's really cool. I've been a part of it. I haven't been fully participating, but I peek in every now and again, and it looks like they're doing some amazing work. So I invited Marianne to talk about Emergent Commons, and she brought the entire family with her. So I'm going to take her in a moment. And actually, we're just going to hand the keys to the STOA completely to her. And then I think a lot of people are going to present today about what Emergent Commons is, and if you're interested, how to join. And then I'll be tagged in at the end, and we're here for 90 minutes in total. And there'll be a Q&A portion as well. So that being said, Mary, welcome to STOA, and Tag, you're it. The keys are yours.
Thank you so much, Peter. Oh, this is so exciting for me. Yeah, Emergent Commons is we're an online community, and we're hosted on Mighty Networks, and there are so many of us here that are from this initial group of volunteers that are from Rebel Wisdom, and we also have so many people that have come in since then. So those of you who are here from Emergent Commons, if you would like to rename yourself with EC at the front of your name, then people here can kind of get an idea of how many of us there are here from Emergent Commons. That would be really fun. So one thing about us is we don't have, like Peter said, we don't have an owner or a couple of owners that run this community. We are run by a group of volunteers who are members. And so that means that we also don't have people that are curating or generating content just for the sake of having content. Everything that is brought to Emergent Commons is brought because somebody was sparked and wanted to share it. So everything that happens at Emergent Commons it's alive and sparky. Yeah, let's see, the volunteers is what makes it successful. There are so many of us. We all have different strengths, and we play to those different strengths, and we support each other and lean on each other where needed. So we're not expected to be superhuman or to be able to do every piece of every volunteer role ourselves. We try to make bite-sized jobs for people, and because we're real humans and we have real lives. We're continually examining EC at a meta level, and so we actually, in deciding what we wanted to bring to the STOA today, we made a video to kind of share, to get some different perspectives and share kind of what we thought was important to bring here today. So David is going to be sharing this video with us.
Give me a moment to set it up, and I will.
All right, and so then I'll just say, please feel free to put questions in the chat. We're going to be having a Q&A later, and so I'll call on you, or if you don't want to be on YouTube, then we can ask the question for you. Yeah, keep the chat hot. And yeah, all questions are good. You ready, David? All right.
All right, here comes the video made by one of our members. So Rebel Wisdom created the love and the connection in the community. And then that love and connection created the commitment of a few people that said, we're gonna do this. And then that commitment created a foundation and set up all the infrastructure, and then kept it going.
I think that's one reason why we have succeeded, because it does not rely on one person or a leader. You know, someone has an idea and they want to do something, it still is their idea.
I think it's important to indicate how much depends on volunteers. It's not like we just have ideas and we just got together and now we're experimenting. People are running the ship here. And being here and setting up the processes that allow people to step back and come back and step back and come back.
To me, there are two pieces. One of them is like, I don't think we started with some grand vision, but we had a set of principles about how we wanted the kind of microstructure of the community to work. It was like everybody needs to feel like they're part of it. Everybody needs to be able to contribute. You know, like if you want to start a crew, then it's all yours.
You know, it's just the unfolding of surfing this wave of what's wanting to emerge, is being attuned. And then people grabbing the wave and then doing things, and people grabbing the wave and doing things.
The emergent part of it is what's kind of coming up for me now. It just keeps, you know, it's like, we don't know where we think we're going this way, and then we might end up being like, well, no, we're going that way now.
Our commitment to that microstructure, that kind of fertile ground to let people participate in their own way, with their own voice, and to create a community for themselves.
We are birthing elders. We're birthing wisdom holders, and give them a space to go like, shine your light.
And then the second thing is the culture that women bring to this community. Like, women engage in relationships differently than men do, and they create community that's different. Women are really good at making communities.
We were grandfathered by the Dia Logos ethic of rebel wisdom. That brought us together.
Like for me, my interest to keep this alive was because of the integrity of David and Ali. And both Terry and I were strong at that.
Something happened here. And can we actually name what it was that made it succeed and go forward?
We fought a lot in the most loving way we could.
And that's important to know. How do you fight lovingly? You know, how did you guys do that? Did you open your heart? Did you say, I'm going to just let go of my own ego? What did you guys actually do?
You do need a small core of people who basically say, I will give my life to make this happen.
Right.
And then other people coalesce around that.
Give your whole life, like you work as if your life depends on it, and then you take it lightly how it goes.
And it's also very important to acknowledge the bootstrap problem. How do you make the first decision? We sweat blood over how do you make the first couple of decisions.
Let's just work on this and do the best we can. And if it fails, it's an experiment. We all learned from it. So we all kind of were curious if we could pull it off.
I love the experimentation part of this community, that we know this is an experiment and we're kind of looking at it from the meta level and knowing that this is going to be messy. We're comfortable with not knowing where it's going, and in a way we're not even taking it too seriously, like, oh my God, we have to get this right. You know, I just feel like we're just very kind of comfortable, like, you know, this is we did a pretty good job. Where are we at where we are, and it'll get where it needs to be.
Like, even if it remained 150 people, it was going to be the grandest 150 people that ever existed.
I love the tensions. When tensions arise, I usually watch it, how it's being resolved. Mostly it happens behind the scenes because I'm not a part of it, but from time to time I see that tension arise, and then it's getting resolved. Then tension again, resolved. From where I'm sitting, it's beautiful.
You know, coming here has allowed me to put forward my ideas and have them challenged and change and challenge other people. And from my point of view, I've seen growth or change in numerous people here during the time that we've been here in a way that which I feel is healthy and beneficial for each of us and our community.
Like, you can't guarantee that you're not going to get activated or triggered, right? I mean, in some places that I go to, a safe place means like there's an expectation that they're not going to get triggered, which is just completely unreasonable to me. It's like the willingness how to proceed when that happens. And my favorite moments have been when we get to do that. And there haven't been that many times, but it is so powerful. Maybe the hardest moments have been my favorites. And I can't talk anymore. I'm crying. Thanks, David. Yeah, so yeah, this is it's an effort of the heart, and everybody that's involved brings their heart forward. So briefly, I just want to talk about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to have a little bit about our approach to moderation, conflict resolution. Terry's going to be giving us some history. We're going to have a little bit of our approach to member engagement and greeting, and John is going to share an actual tension with us. Kai is going to talk about the Constitution. We're going to talk a little bit about crews, and not in that order. So Terry, you want to take it away with some history for us?
Thanks, Mari. Yeah, I was there at the beginning when David and Allie began to feel that it was no longer their priority to run a community. Plus, they were having serious challenges of a time suck with having to moderate. So 4 of us stepped forward and said, we'll take it. And about a couple dozen people gathered right around us. It was a couple months of negotiation. And David and Allie sat us down and warned us. They said, do you understand what a responsibility moderation is? We're not giving you the keys to this mailing list until you show us that you have a plan for moderation. So that was one of our first priorities. And it's been one of our biggest tensions, figuring out how to do that appropriately. From my own perspective, this is just my perspective, the other 2 major tensions that we've faced are more generally between a narrow purpose and a narrow, tight structure and a broader purpose and looser structure. We're dealing with those issues all the time. And then the third major tension or issue was, how the heck do you make the first decisions? Can the 4 of us make a decision? Can we even decide we're going to meet on Tuesday? Or do we have to get everybody together to decide we're on Tuesday? You guys all know the drill, how that goes in organizations. It all worked out after some sweat and tears, much thanks to Kai, who developed a constitution for us and based it largely in sociocracy, such that we have teams, we have a coordinating team, individual teams filled by volunteers, and a structure of both common areas and individual crew spaces. And all that has worked out pretty darn well. The other thing I wanted to tell you was a little bit about our stats to give you a feeling how we are fitting. We keep trying to decide, how do we fit in with the rest of the liminal community? And we have over 500 people, a lot of new folks just this last week with the closing of Rebel Wisdom. Of those, about 200 people visit once a month. Of those, about a half visit once a week. And of those, about half, 50 or so, are there every day, the serious nerds. Now, according to Mighty Networks, those are very good, very strong. They base it on your monthly, and they say that's a very strong turnout for our size. We did see a dip with the end of the pandemic. Our monthly average members started leveling off, but our core seems to still be strong. And I think that's enough from me, and I'll turn it over back to Mari.
Yeah, and so I think Adriana is going to share a little bit about our image and which is this beautiful elephant I'm going to share. So Adriana, are you ready?
Yeah, but I'm happy for people to jump in. What I'm going to share about the elephants that as we were coming from Rebel Wisdom and really having the sense making and really strongly at the birth of Emergent Commons, but also the notion of different perspectives being really, really important. And the fact that the elephant, we all feel a different part of the elephant. So the whole tale of the blind, I don't know how many men, I'm telling the story wrong. If somebody knows the version of the story better than me, it's that we're all feeling a different part of the elephant. Like somebody feels the trunk and goes, this is the elephant, and it feels soft and like a snake. And somebody holds the leg of the elephant. Oh, this is the elephant. It feels sturdy and like a trunk of a tree. And anyway, so the idea was that we get the whole elephant to symbolize all the ways that we can together make sense of something in a much more whole way. And even though, and we're gonna talk about it later today, we're talking about our purpose now at this moment, reigniting that conversation. It's still very present at Emergent Commons, the fact that what binds us is the different outlook and the different even inclinations. And I think that this is also something we inherited from Rebel Wisdom, because Rebel Wisdom was such a sun in the middle of constellations of philosophy or trauma or embodiment and sense making. There were different things that attracted different people. So we collated that. We, as Rebel Wisdom members that made Emergent Commons, we had different interests amongst us, and that's reflected in the elephant. And that's all a helpful part of making sense together. And the woman that made the art is Natasha. She's she was a Rebel Wisdom member, an artist, beautiful artist, and she's also a member, I think, at Emergent Commons, a quiet member at the moment. Anything else? If anybody feels like adding to this, or Natasha's direct. Yes, exactly. Yes, Ariane. Thank you.
No, thank you, Adriana. Yeah, that's awesome. And so the hands that you could see all over the elephant are, you know, representative of each of our hands, trying to like just feeling a different part of it and bringing that to life. And so next we have Kai, who's going to share with us a little bit about moderation and conflict resolution.
Yeah, thanks. So this is a big topic, and I'm going to time myself to see if I can keep it relatively short, because there's so much to say here. And obviously, this is a big conversation that's happening even globally right now. Twitter has brought it back into the forefront again, as there's a further conversation about how do you handle the various tensions that come up around, in particular, in fact, I'll draw from some language that we came up around this. How do you create a space that's safe enough not to silence voices and brave enough to discuss difficult topics, right? And there's this constant tension of what safety means to one person or another, what bravery looks like to one person or another, and trying to find an effective way to not only create a space where the generative conflict can still happen and that you're not filtering out too many people in the process, and also that there's an opportunity for growth in that process as well. And that's something that's been very important to us. So I'll give a little bit of a history first, because I think this also ties into how we approach things. And that is that initially there were in fact two teams. There was a moderation team and a conflict support team. And the idea was moderation was, oh, well, we'll have to deal with, you know, spam, things like that, and sort of deleting posts, and that's what moderation is. And then conflict support was about people getting into conflict with one another. How can we support them to turn that into something generative and be an opportunity for growth, as opposed to a, you know, obviously a disruption to the community or something that prevents other people feeling safe sharing. And what ultimately happened is that these things are absolutely entwined, because posts that lead to conflict inevitably then bring about this opportunity for that sort of support, especially when you're starting to think not in terms of deleting posts, but how can we generatively engage with the sorts of responses and reactions and our own internal responses reactions that come up when something is triggering, when a post or an action or a statement or something is triggering, right? So ultimately it was found that what we needed to do was combine these groups. What's interesting about that is from very early on, some people said, great, I'll be part of this combined group, but I refuse to be a moderator. In other words, I refuse to be someone who ends up deleting anything. And this comes to one of the fundamental tensions. Oh, I'm really needing to move faster here. Okay. Which is between this sort of, okay, let's see, I'm trying to get to the key points here. I want to talk about how the fear of doing that and the tension, holding the tension of that, also allowed us to generate a different way of approaching the problem. And I want to make sure that I address that. So you have this challenge of sort of free speech absolutism on one side and kind of overly structured tyranny, if you will, on the other. And you have on both ends sort of psychologically people who will respond violently to either one, right? I feel like someone taking any action whatsoever is tyranny. I feel like allowing people to say these sorts of things about me in public is also going to prevent me from being any part of this. So our fundamental approach to this is to start slowly and initially watch and see. So the first response almost always is, let's see where this goes. Are these people going to find a way to resolve this conflict themselves, right? Are other members going to step in and help support this conflict? If that doesn't seem to be happening, the next step is engagement behind the scenes. So there's a big difference between having a feud in front of the entire community and having a gentle conversation to the side. Can we pause and slow down for a moment and tell me what you meant to say when you were saying this? Talk to me a little bit about coming up for you in this conflict that we're seeing happen. And a lot of times what can happen is these behind scenes conversations lead to the point where people alter or remove their own posts or add additional material to sort of clarify what they were saying or sort of speak from a place that's a little bit more grounded. And so prioritizing this way of doing things, I think, prevents the quick backlash of simply deleting things and also provides us opportunity for growth. So that's sort of the direction we try to go with this. Okay, so skipping along, there's so many interesting things to say about all this because we've learned so much in the process of trying our experiments around it. I'll say that, okay, I'll just say a couple of things that brought up questions and challenges, just so everyone gets a sense of the things we're dealing with. So we kind of came up with 3 things that the community could actually agree on, because there's so much of this tension around, free speech, et cetera. But there was agreement around things like spam, around personal attacks, and doxing. Now, what's interesting is that sounds pretty straightforward, and it turns out none of those are straightforward. Every one of them leads to interpretation. So for example, this piece about spam, or what we call commerce out of place. Okay, so we don't want people showing up, not engaging as a community member, and throwing up other advertisements for their things, right? Well, how about a person who comes in, is a committed and involved member, and posts something that links to a page where they sell things? The spirit of that is certainly not spam, and yet it's still linking to something that's for sale. And so every one of these, there's so many opportunities to get into the weeds with these things. And I just want to kind of give a sense of how this gets complicated really quickly. I can say a lot more about all of that, including what personal attacks, what does that actually mean? What does that look like? Skipping forward. Okay, I'm going on too long. I wanted to talk about that. And okay, here's another piece that, a last piece that I'll bring in. So this process I described earlier, first of all, it involves a fair amount of people, right? And this was the thing that David and Ali dealt with earlier. And that now, as having a group support the sort of behind the scenes conversations that I talked about earlier, really allows that to become a little more scalable, but it's also not necessarily fast enough for some situations. And so we had a glorious opportunity recently where a person arrived to challenge all of the assumptions about what people thought was okay for themselves and others. And it brought a lot of great conversation. And it also brought a realization that this process needs to be able to move faster. And the exchange for speed, and we'll talk about this more with the Constitution later, is potentially tyranny, right? So fewer people can make decisions quicker, greater input from more people has more people have the opportunity to find flaws in a response and have everyone feel included, and takes too long. So how do you find that space in between? And so in the spirit of this sort of safe to try or safe to fail experiments that we've been trying, we have a new version of the moderation conflict support process that involves first responders. And so we have people who are sort of on task as first responders, and they make initial decisions. And some of those are easy to make. So the ones where we have clear agreement of the sorts of things that we say, hey, sorry, that's not something we allow here, great. Then there's an escalating series of levels of engagement required of the larger team and the community itself, depending on the level of 2 different things. The action that will be taken, right? So you can't just arbitrarily ban a member without a lot of input. But you might be able to respond to a post much more quickly. And then a little bit later, think about deleting a post. So action-based, you want to have some sort of metric. And the other is issue-based, right? So certain issues, certain things that someone might do, you want to have a quick response to. Others, where we have less clarity, you want to have a little bit more input. So we kind of have these metrics that we use to determine how the first responders respond and how much time they take and how many people they engage with. Anyway, a lot more to say about all of these things. Some great examples that came up. I think there might be a tension we talk about later. But I feel like this has been a big part of our process and experience, is working out an effective way to go about creating a generative space of managing conflict and moderation. I think next, John is actually going to speak about a specific tension. Is that right?
Oh, this is wonderful. It's so good to be in a room where so many faces I know. So on October 19th of last year, 2021, Peter Limberg published an article breaking the polarity spell of the COVIDiots and COVIDians. And that's one of the pieces of content that was posted at Emergent Commons. As was said earlier, we don't generate our own content, but we use Peter's and many other pieces of content. That triggered a lot of discussion at Emergent Commons, and that discussion led to an event almost exactly a year ago. Steel manning vaccine mandates was the event, and the principals were Terry and Brian. And that event is on video in the public domain, so I will share a link to that afterwards. Initially, I was very pessimistic about that event. I thought culture war is coming to Emergent Commons. Polarization is coming to Emergent Commons. I was concerned. Nevertheless, the event took place. It was really quite good. And the discussion continued after the event. All I will say is that the discussion afterwards was somewhat less civil than the video. There was conflict. There was tension. Nevertheless, from my perspective, there was a big success. And maybe I'm setting the bar very low, but the success is that event did not rip Emergent Commons apart. We survived the event. That's a success because the issue continues to play out in society, very political. It is ripping families apart. It is ripping communities apart. It did not rip Emergent Commons apart. And I personally learned that I was very wrong about my expectations, and very pleased that I would say we not only survived that event, we have thrived as a community. The tension remains, there are scars, but I think there is something now emerging in the bigger community, well beyond Emergent Commons. So this is not going to go away. It's not going to go away at Emergent Commons because I'm going to bring it up again. A big player in the big space, Charles Eisenstein, has recently published a couple of essays, still on the same topic. And this is my own opinion, not an Emergent Commons opinion, but Charles seems to be emerging as a champion of one tribe, of the anti-vaccine mandate tribe. So this needs further discussion. I think Emergent Commons is a safe space where we can continue to deal with the issue. It has essentially faded in the background at Emergent Commons, and we're fine as a community. So stay tuned, more to come.
Awesome, thank you, John. And so on that note of community, that leads me into talking about the teams. So we have these various volunteer teams, and one of them is member engagement. We initially called ourselves onboarding because we realized, okay, we're going to be getting people to request to join and requesting to join, and how are we going to approve them, and what are we going to do once they arrive? We don't want people to come in and then just feel like a number, or feel like, you know, it's okay if they sit on the sideline unrecognized, that there's something other than, you know, human and desired to be part of this community and to bring whatever light forward that they want to shine. And so we renamed onboarding to member engagement. And from the beginning, we sent out greeter messages by email or by the chat feature that we have in Mighty Networks. And we got a lot of good feedback about that. But actually, after several months, realized, and I think it was Terry, that I'm gonna give some credit to Terry here, but it could be somebody else, said, you know what, I think we should do one-to-one Zoom calls with new members. And so we implemented that as part of our protocol for greeting new members, and it has been amazing. So our greeters take 1 week shifts. During that week, we admit people and we reach out to them, and we try to have this one-to-one Zoom call. So not everyone responds. Maybe they don't see the email, or maybe they don't have time. Maybe they don't see the chat. There are various reasons. But for those who do respond and get this one-to-one chat, I mean, it's great. We get so much good feedback, but it is so much fun getting to know people coming in and what they expect from the community and what they hope from the community, or what they do in their lives, or how we can actually help them navigate Mighty Networks, which they might be familiar with through Sensemaking 101 or through various other communities, how they can best be engaged in our community, because every Mighty Networks group is set up differently. And so being able to walk people through and answer questions, and then remain the greeter for that person, you know, into the future. And so having that person have a point of contact that they can ask questions, it has been, I mean, it's great. It's helped me break out of my shell and be more engaging and open with people. I used to be much shyer, actually, believe it or not. Yeah, so it's great. And this approach just, it's like how to really see people. Like, we want people to be seen, and we want them to know that right off the bat, they're full members. Like, there's no test that you have to pass. There's nothing that you have to do to say, okay, now you can, now you can create an event, or now you can host a crew. You're like, you join and boom, member. And we want to make everyone feel like they truly have a place that if they want to engage and if they want to bring something that lights them up, that this is a place that they can do it. We have a couple of other teams as well. We have a tech team. They helped us decide which platform we would move to. And so that, I think that's going to be a question later for in the Q&A. And we have the governance team, and Kai headed that up, but there were several people involved in that, in developing the Constitution. And then our coordinating team that Terry talked about is made up of members of each of those teams, so that we are talking with each other. We have representatives from each of the teams on the coordinating team, so that we know what's going on, and we can have information be disseminated to the teams. We can also get input from the teams to the coordinating team. And then we have a couple of positions that are members at large. And so there's so much cross-pollination, and there's so much possibility for like getting the bigger picture and having a deeper understanding of what's going on at all these different levels of Emergent Commons. And the coordinating team, we meet every couple of weeks, and even though we have an agenda, to me, it is a meeting of the heart. It doesn't feel like check the box, that we did this, we did this. I love taking notes. I take notes for these meetings, and it's just, I don't know, it really, the meetings they're very, very special, and they're open to the entire community. We love having visitors and love having input or questions or challenges, what's going on. So those coordinating team meetings are great. And so I'm going to hand it back over to Kai to talk a little bit about the Constitution.
Yeah, thanks. And actually, you kind of teed it up a little bit, talking about the structure. I was hoping to show a picture of it, so we can talk a little bit about where that came from and why we took some of those approaches. And I'm going to try and do it less time than the last time I took up the mic. So I think first I'm just going to read through some of the key principles we used in thinking about this. So we did use sociocracy and holacracy as models to draw from, but our intention was to try and create something simpler that people could grasp more readily, that we could keep small and simple in the beginning, and then only sort of let it accrete as was necessary. Also wanted to point out that the couple of people that were initially involved in the process was myself, Soren, David Hagar, Grace, who I think I saw here earlier. And so we initially kind of got together and came up with our initial proposal for how we might do this. Okay, so I'm just going to run through these quickly, talking about our initial goals. We wanted a minimum viable governance model. So in other words, as small and light as possible. We wanted to experiment with self-management and kind of a flat hierarchy system. Another big influence, I think a lot of people know Laloux's book, Reinventing Organizations. And I think one of the things that myself, having done some work in this area, and these others who had experience as well, thinking about structure and also developmental aspects of the members involved. So a lot of times things like holacracy, for example, focus a lot on structure. Here's how we create a structure where we don't have to have leadership in the same way, but thinking less about the developmental levels of the people involved and how that's a necessary element for that sort of thing to work smoothly. So we wanted to have a place that helped generate that as well. Okay. And again, this trade-off between speed and effectiveness versus trust and engagement that I mentioned earlier. Okay, 3 more things I wanted to say really quickly about the Constitution and the values that we held with that. Continuity, assuring that the community is a lively place where people engage and find value, that the platform continues, so there's a place for that to happen. And the Constitution itself evolves to serve the evolving needs of the community, that's baked in. Mutual respect, assure there's a culture of respectful discussion and challenging topics, differences is supported, and building a sense of usness in the community. So less of an us and them, and how can we encourage more of a quality of us, of connectedness within the community in this process as well. And then transparency is responsibility, assuring there's all membership visibility into the volunteer responsibilities and ownership. Okay, so I think from there, I'm just going to skip right over to the diagram. And let me just share that. And I think that will actually, oh, Mari, I think you have to give me access to screen sharing.
Looks like Peter's on that.
Okay, great. There we go. Yeah. Here we go. So just really quickly taking a look at this diagram, we can see some of the things that Mari was talking about earlier, where we recognize that there's just some things that have to get done. And how do you go about doing that? And so creating these separate volunteer teams for tech and logistics, keeping the platform running, member engagement team, moderation, conflict support, these sort of essential functions get handled, and that there's a way that they continue to intermesh and stay interconnected, and that's the coordinating team. So effectively you have these sort of representatives from each of those things that's on the team. So anything that happens moves quickly and disperses amongst the different teams. Hey, we're doing a thing over here. Oh, wow, we're doing something along those lines too. Let's make sure we have a conversation. Those things happen organically. And again, the idea is as much as possible, creating something simple that allows this organic dispersion of ideas and making sure that things get picked up and taken care of at the same time. Also wanted to point out that trying to keep this playful. So I think a great example is the crew farmer. So we have a role that the crew farmer composts old crews and looks at what crews could use more support and creating and seeding new crews. And so we really try to keep the naming and the spirit of the whole thing playful and this whole thing as light as possible. Lastly, I'll just make a final comment that I think that thinking out this Constitution and putting these pieces together has been really helpful. We've also learned a lot about what people just don't care about. And so we have the Constitution written up in a way that's the people who read it point out that it's quite readable and very few people have read it. And it turns out that we haven't needed it more than what it's provided us already. And I think that that's significant, that the point at which we run into, wait, do we have a way to resolve this thing? Yes, we do, but because there's enough kind of connectedness and natural human goodwill within the scale of community, there hasn't been as much need for that. And I think that's telling as well.
All right, thanks, Kai. And so then bringing forth that quality of usness, there's another way that us is involved in Emergent Commons, and that is in crews. And so crews are what we call, and we inherited this name from Rebel Wisdom, they're groups of people that are oriented around practices or maybe geography or topics discussions. And so crews can be set up for a short amount of time. It might be, okay, let's have 6 sessions of discussion on such and such, or it could be indefinite. It could be ongoing. So basically, these groups are hosted by, they're hosted by members of Emergent Commons. And so somebody says, oh, hey, I'm interested in hosting. So for instance, I have a crew on grief. So I'm like, I'm interested in hosting a crew on grief. So I say, okay, I'd like to host this crew. This is what I want to name it. I want to have asynchronous and synchronous. I want it to be indefinite. And I'm the host. So I get to make the decisions. I like to work in coordination with the people in my crew, but I basically get to call the shots. And so my crew is grief. That's not very controversial, but we actually could at Emergent Commons have crews that have almost conflicting purposes or conflicting sorts of, not really approaches, but because the host can run it the way they want to. And so there could be a crew where they're talking about, you know, like if we want to go back to this vaccine or not debate, there could be like there could be a crew that's kind of pro-vaccine, and there could be one that isn't. But basically, our approach is we are defaulting to this curiosity and to this basic respect for each other, and this uplifting the dignity in the other, and following rule omega and finding out, you know, how am I activated, and how can I grow through this. So yeah, so the crews are really where a lot of the juice is at Emergent Commons. And several of the crews have regular meetings, and so it's not just all asynchronous post comment. There are a lot of meetings that happen, and so we actually have a few people here today that are going to share about their crews. And Jeremy Bray is the first. So are you ready, Jeremy, to share a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I'll try to keep my eye on the time. I've only got, say, 3 minutes. There's a lot to talk about. So I host the Sense-Making Discussion, which is a weekly discussion on Tuesday nights in the US and in the Northern Hemisphere. What we do is we aim to not only discuss sense-making tactics and sense-making strategies and how we make sense, but also engage in practical sense-making. So it's sense-making across all aspects, and it's an exploration. It's completely open. I tell people it's a free speech zone. It's not a safe space. So you're welcome to come in with all of your points. We've discussed vaccines. We've discussed problems with politics. We've discussed QAnon. We've discussed all these sort of things. And what's wonderful for me is we've had hardly any conflict. And the conflict that has happened has been moderated within the group. They're a surprising group. We normally get between 7 and 12 people. The most we've had is 15. And I say we talk until exhaustion. So normally calls go for about 3 hours. And the idea is just to let topics unfold and everyone gets a chance to have their say, and there's nothing stopping anyone from participating. It's interesting, the dynamics. Sometimes the real conversation happens after about 2 hours. So we're talking for about 2 hours, and then sometimes at the 2-hour mark, it becomes really intense. And we start exploring some really deep topics and really personal topics as people bring their stories to the group and they share their opinions, and we discuss these among ourselves and respond to them. It's quite extraordinary. It's a really cognitively diverse group of people, really cognitively diverse. One thing I've realized is, or possibly the biggest learning I've had from participating in this for a year, we've been going for just over a year, is just how shallow my thinking was before I joined this group. I now can see new dimensions and new paradigms that I never knew existed before. And they have enriched my way of seeing the world. A bit like the elephant diagram, I'm now seeing how other people see the elephant, whereas before I really only knew my way. So it has opened me up to different ways that people see the world. Artists, religious people, people who live in a philosophy of love, writers, psychologists. I've learned so much from all these people. The group often surprises me. I once tried to invite a third speaker in, and that external speaker to discuss things with, and they flat out refused. They said no. Sometimes I put up, in our discussion notes, I put up assumptions that I think are true about the world, and the group comes out flatly and says, no, you're wrong, this is why you're wrong. I've learned so much from it. It's just a wonderful group. It's a respectful sharing of stories and opinions. And yeah, I think that covers all my points. So yeah, it's a respectful group for sharing ideas about sense making and helping make sense of the world. And it has brought so much depth to me and my perspective, and I hope it's done that for other people in the group. And all are welcome. There's no restrictions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeremy. That's really touching. Leilani also has a crew. It's called The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, and she's going to share a little bit about it.
Yeah, thank you, Mari. Yes, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So, movies. Cinematic shadow integration, or the art of conscious recreation. That's the subtitle, the tagline of the crew. And I never intended to start a crew. It's just, I was inspired one day and it was like, oh, this might make a good crew. And so I started it. And from the beginning, I didn't want to do all of it myself. I wanted really active and strong group participation. And so the way I structured it was to have ask for volunteers to select a movie that we would all watch on our own and then come back during our events and have a conversation that was led by that member, not by me, so that we get to know each other more deeply over the course of the event, over the 90 minutes of our event, when we're talking about the movie and the person is talking about what it means to them, why they chose the movie, what's important to them, what's really relevant. And what I'm getting so much from these events over the course of this year, and we started in August of last year, is how real people really are when they show up and talk from that space of why this matters to them, what's important, and how it reveals to them deeper parts of themselves. And I'm gonna cry. So because there's a number of people here today that are members of the crew. Over the course of this last year and over a year, we've had 33 events, 33 movies that we've watched and talked about. We are scheduled into January. We meet every 2 weeks, so we have time to watch a movie in between and then have a more quality conversation. We have about 50 members actually in the crew with an attendance, regular attendance between 15 and 20 people, with usually about 12 to 15 people attending each event. And one of the, I just want to say thank you to everybody that's participated, because it's been so rich and has deepened my own appreciation of all of you. Thank you.
Awesome, Leilani, thanks. Yeah, it's the few that I've been to have been truly transformational. And I mean, some of them I didn't even watch the movie, but just the discussion is so rich, and there's so much possibility for shadow work. And yeah, Leilani's an excellent host in helping facilitate. So we have one more crew to highlight. There are a lot of crews, but John is going to share about his crew, which is called Not Game A.
Thanks, Mari, but that's not the crew I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about crafting communitas. No problem. So I joined Emergent Commons in July of 2021. So I take no credit for the good start that the community got off on. I made none of those early contributions, and I came to something that was up and running quite well already. The first thing that happened is I was greeted That was a new experience for me because it was the first community I joined that I was greeted. That got me off to a good start. So the following month in August, I initiated a couple of meetings in the coffee house and people came. My experience in other communities was essentially being ignored, not connecting and resonating with people. So August was a good experience. So in September, I decided to start my own crew. And I took a little different approach than the two crews that we've heard about. I wanted to limit my crew to 5 people. I was looking for something more intimate and small. And even though I invited 5 people, 10 people responded initially, but I stuck to my guns and started with 5. I also asked for a commitment. I asked the people, please commit to 10 meetings, 2 per month for 5 months. That's a big commitment. But people said, yes, we will commit. And then that commitment was honored. And we had our 10 meetings and we've had more. So it was very intimate, some very powerful sharing. I'm looking at this session here. We have 47 participants at the moment. You cannot easily be seen in a group this large. And if you want to be seen and if you want to see others, you need small groups. So I'm an advocate. I love the bigger groups, but 5 meeting regularly gives a very different experience. I also personally have a need for psychological safety. So I call Emergent Commons my safe space, and I call Crafting Communitas my very safe space. And I'm one of the people who have been triggered at Emergent Commons, and I've been supported in a beautiful way, not my ideas being supported, but me as a human being being supported. And in a small group of 5, that works very nicely. We intended to meet for 10 meetings. That was the commitment. We have now met for 15. We continue to meet. We continue to meet as a group of 5. People have layers. It takes a long time for people to show their deep layers. And that will not come out to the same degree in larger crews, but it will come out in a small group of 5. And I will say people who do not lead with ego, their layers do not show quickly. It takes time to dig into those deeper layers. And we have certainly done that, some very deep sharing that I would not do in larger crews or with Emergent Commons as a whole. So I encourage everybody to, within a larger community that you're comfortable, find a few people that you feel particularly comfortable with, start your own crew. My experience has been very, very good. And some of those people are here, and just thank you so much for being part of Crafting Communitas. I'll talk about not game A some other time, Mari.
Sounds good. Thank you, John. Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing. Yeah, there's so much variety in the crews, and it's really what it's people are sparked, like something is alive for them, something's enchanting, and so they want to bring it forth. I was recently listening to Layman Pascal on Daniel, I don't know how to say his last name, Kazajian's podcast, and he's talking about whim fulfillment. And to me, Emergent Commons is such a great place to practice whim fulfillment. I'm like, on a whim, I'm like, oh, I want to make a meeting about parenting. Okay, so I put up a post in here. Who's interested in talking about parenting? And so then we're going to have, an event on parenting. And that whim, there's something about that whim that's really, really important to me and deep. And I don't know exactly what it is, but it doesn't matter. The thing is, it's important. And in this place, I get to feel out how it's important with other people. So now Adriana is going to share a little bit with us, bring in some emergence and some feminine, some of the feminine and some weaving. So go for it, Adriana. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Mari. Yeah, it's beautiful to hear everybody. If I start coughing in the middle of the things, I have this crazy cough. So I'll weave this with, so I'm here, I'm in London now, and I came to London for the closing of Rebel Wisdom. So that's somebody was asking about the feminine, Rebel Wisdom being the masculine component, and then they, at some point, I mean, they were trying to hold both the feminine and the masculine. And then at some point they were like, you know, it's really tricky to hold the community. And then we took it on. And it really felt like in the closing of the gathering, it was really beautiful to see how much support Emergent Commons gave to the event. So that's to show just how, so Kevin that is here was actually doing the camera action. Mari was holding the online part. Me and another Emergent Common friend, we held a little component of the gathering, which was a communal part. So I think that speaks to the nature of Emergent Commons, which is relational, as we spoke about. So, but relational as a priority, which I think it's a rare thing, like to have relational not as a sidetrack, or like, oh, we do this, we network and we are relational, or you know, there is this important, I don't know, there's this topic and we are relational. Actually, we are relational. And then through relationships, networking happens, but it happens because we love people and we love each other. And through deep love and trust and connection, then it's like, oh, I like this person. What do you do again? That's rare. Like, I'm finding that this is really rare in the world. And I think that it's a gem. And the fact that we don't even know, I'd say, that I appreciate so many people here and I have no idea what they do in the world. I can feel into their gifts and talents because of the way they show up. So it keeps me alert to how people are. It's not that they come with a label, you know, the CEO of something, or so the whole networking just for the sake of it. A few people came to Emergent Commons and tried to do that, but it doesn't fit well. Like we all go like, oh, you know, it's different. It's different when somebody doesn't go and hi, you know, I'm just trying to, I'm new here, or I'm trying to check things out. So I think that this feels really, to me, it feels really refreshing. So it's a place that feels really refreshing, and it has. So I'd say the David in the video was talking about it has a lot of women, and then I was speaking in the video about the wisdom holders and the matriarchs, which we do have. So we do have elders which have not only more time available, but capacity and wisdom to pour into a system. So that feels really healthy to have different people contributing with what they can, but then we have people that they're in a stage of life in which they can pour time and they can nurture. The nurturing feels really healthy and vital for the health of this community. I think that if we didn't have the elders and the constant nurturing of the space, it would have been just a really good idea that might have lasted for a year. So yeah, I think that's probably the most important things. And then there are other questions that weave with that maybe we can answer at the end.
Right, and so we have had a few questions. Brandon, you asked one pretty early on. Do you want to ask that question?
Yeah, I think Adriana sort of started getting into it, but let me ask the question here, and maybe there's more that could be said here. So interesting that Rebel Wisdom initially appealed quite a bit more to men, or so it seems, since it kind of came through a journalism project focused on Jordan Peterson and the phenomenon he became. So EC leadership seems perhaps even more female now. And so JP became famous in part because he was taking seriously and acknowledging the validity of male issues and concerns that our contemporary ethos, that many academics and other cultural elites were dismissing and ignoring. Some communities coming from Jordan Peterson certainly descended into toxic masculinity, but Rebel Wisdom and Emergent Commons was apparently able to maintain this attention and concern for male perspectives while bringing forth a community leadership that has a strong female presence. Can you guys offer reflections on this?
Great. So I think Terry's gonna give us an answer for this one.
It's interesting that Mari threw this to me because in some ways I've got more of a yang energy. So I'm kind of the last person, but I recognize, I sense that Rebel Wisdom, much of what they were doing was trying to integrate the male and the female. And therefore, most of us who were attracted had some aspect of that and appreciate the need to do that.
Can I give it a go? I'll just
yes, yeah.
Please. I think a bit that I feel it's really important. So that what Terry pointed to feels right to me. So the women that were attracted to Rebel Wisdom were women that were interested in mind topic, in discernment. Either they're like that themselves or they wanted to practice it. So that feels a really healthy part of it. So that feels really healthy. We're not just heart-centered, completely wishy-washy, lost in our confusion, because it can be like heart-centered spaces can have that shadow element to it. And I don't think that people that were attracted to Rebel Wisdom hadn't had that. We can have other little pathologies, but not that one. So I think that the ones of us that gravitated towards Emergent Commons, I'd say that because it's so relational, you got the best of the mind, like people that wanted the mind a lot, and then said, well, we're missing relationships, so let's go for it. And then you have the best of both worlds, because that's what Rebel Wisdom was lacking. They were trying, even Ali said at the conference, he said, we failed at doing relationship because it takes time, patience, effort, nurturing, everything that they didn't have. Whereas we do have all of these components, and especially the elders, as I meant, like the constant nurturing. So then I think that's the ingredient that was missing.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit more specifically, I mean, every man that has been part of any of the teams, the coordinating teams, the development on any of the teams, seems to be pretty integrated. And so there's not this like dominance or this assumption that women can't be involved or shouldn't be involved or don't hold some really, really important piece. There's a basic underlying respect and trust that each person has something to bring. And so I really have felt from the beginning invited into leadership at any level that I want to participate. Not expected in any way, but I don't feel like anybody, like there has been an expectation. There has been an invitation from the beginning from everybody, from men and women, to be fully myself in whatever, as much of an integrated person as I am. And so that has been really, really beautiful. So we have another question from, yeah?
If I could add one more quick piece to that, I'll actually expand it a little bit. I just want to expand it a little bit bigger than that even, which is that I think one of the beautiful things about this, and this is the piece about having a little bit more people involved, which can sometimes be challenging and right, we've talked about that. But there's this way that I know this word is a little bit toxic sometimes now, but diversity has such a powerful effect because the people in the space are holding different poles. And so what tends to happen is if we start moving in a certain direction, then someone notices, hey, there's a piece missing. And then the container that we've created is one such that we're open to hearing that. And so there are times we move a little bit towards, like, let's feel into the space, and that becomes a really beautiful experience, but then we're getting a little bit lost. And then there's this, oh, wait, can we come back and create a little more structure and make sure we're working through the pieces we need to work through? And there's this ebb and flow between more than just masculine and feminine, but of a variety of different poles that people are holding. And there's this openness to receiving, oh, we're missing a piece, let's bring that in right now because we can feel that happening. And I think that receptiveness and that diversity of things being held is a really powerful part of what's made this sustainable and is what it is.
Full agreement. Danny had a question. Do you want to share that, Danny?
Yes, I was just balancing out, and we were talking of the tensions and the conflicts and all of, because we're all dealing with that in our whole lives. But one part of our name is emerge, right? So the emerging, I'm just wondering, for those that have been around a long time, something that maybe emerged in Emergent Commons for you that was a surprise. It's not what you thought would ever be there or whatever.
That's a great question. Alexasha, go for it.
I am surprised that I'm still around. That's what the surprise. It just brings me back, and the opportunity to volunteer, to see the results, to see the growth, to see the depth of relationships keeps bringing me back. So that's surprising.
I think one thing that surprises me is I have not seen volunteer burnout. And in fact, I mean, if I weren't limited by time, I would actually want to contribute more and volunteer more. I mean, I have dreams of, in-person events and organizing them, and I don't see burnout in other people, and I do see ways that there are enough of us that we can step back and we can take some time and take a breather, maybe have a little nervous breakdown if we need to, and then come back and really be in the space, and we're held and supported the whole time. Anyone else have anything that has surprised them? Yeah, Adriana.
I think even the notion of the elders for me has surprised me. I didn't think of that as we started. There was a lot of things that is only looking and having an eagle-eye view of what's going on and how people are showing up. That when I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's really surprising. So look at how all these people started showing up really amazingly and crafting so beautifully. Or the, for example, Kevin, I'm like pointing to you, Kevin. It's just the gifting, the generosity of people's hearts. The generosity of people's hearts, like nobody's pressuring anybody to show up, nobody's showing up for anybody else. It's all their own, just willingness to give for the sake of their own heart. And there's a lot of that, and it really touches me deeply. I think there's something, and I know that Kevin and Kai are working on something, looking at the harvest at Emergent Commons. But I think that there's a lot of those looking back and going like, why is this community successful? It's a microcosm of lots of mini learnings, and I feel it's there's a lot of gems there that at some point we'll be able to share, and mistakes that hopefully, there's a lot of those.
And Peter, you have a few questions. Do you want? Oh, David, yeah, go ahead. You want to answer?
Yeah. One of the things that's really surprising to me is like a lot of these communities, the Rebel Wisdom was kind of this way. Like you would you come and you would talk about a topic, it becomes sort of like an object, right? And everybody goes, ooh, wow, that's really cool. And we all sort of like wonder about it. But then there's this relational aspect. And I have been immensely surprised where there wasn't any topic at all. And you talk to people and you start to connect. And the number of those conversations that result in people having tears of joy of finding someone that sees them and understands, and they are going through this internal transformative process of talking about what's going on and having someone else be there that understands it. And like that happens so much more than anywhere else I've ever seen because of the relational connection and because of, I don't know, the weird filter of the people who walk through the front door and the people that show up. There's a kind of magic that happens when you sit down and have a conversation with someone. but that one thing, that sort of like personal transformation through relational dialogos or love. I was really surprised by that.
Awesome, thanks. Peter, did you want to ask any of your questions? You have a priority?
Yeah. First, I wanted to share just how sort of like impressed I am with the thoughtfulness and the care that has gone into this community. It's really awesome to see. And Adriana talked in the beginning about like being wise elders, and I can see Emergent Commons as almost like an entity advising other communities that are emerging or want to emerge, best protocols and relational practices and stuff like that. And so I guess my question would be, anything you would recommend for people listening now that like have a community or want to spark a new community and want to do it right?
Yeah, one really big thing is having your moderation and conflict support, whatever you're going to call that, or however you're going to do that, having that approach in place at the beginning, rather than waiting for conflict to arise and then like, oh, how do we manage this? Like really having something that you feel comfortable with, but also something that is dynamic and it can be reviewed and revisited, reevaluated. It can grow as you learn the people that are in the community and as you learn the team itself and what the team can handle and wants to handle and how the team wants to grow and how the team wants to interact with the community and how people can be brought in. And so that's huge, just having that in place. Anyone else have any musts for starting a community?
If I may suggest, Emergent Commons could be an incubator for a community. Come join Emergent Commons, start a crew, invite your people. We've got the infrastructure. And then if it really takes off, then spin off your own community using our templates. Maybe.
I could say something. So most people, when they sit down and think about a community, they do it in a top-down design kind of way. They're like, okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to have this rule, and like on Tuesdays we're going to do this, and that's not going to work very well unless you have done this over and over again and you know what you're doing. And so I think the best advice that I have is look at building a community as a learning practice. Like, this thing is going to teach you things. And if you are open to learning and you are open to changing and open to paying attention to what actually happens and how well it works, then the process of building a community will teach you how to make a community. And it will expose your shadows and all your mistakes and all the other things. It becomes a sacred practice. And I think looking at community building as a sacred practice is the right way to do it.
That is so beautiful, David, and I find that to be so true in my life. Clay, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks. I'm so impressed with this organization. If I wasn't already a member, I would join. And I think I really do. I feel like I will be going toward being more of a regular, like more than once a month member. But so I was there in the very beginning, kind of almost like, I want to make sure this happens. And the thing that I want to point to as part of the template, if you're going forward as a, sort of a incubator style, is that it needs to start with commitment, and you all had that. I mean, I had it, you had it, everyone who's here, who was there in the beginning had a commitment to like, this is something possible. And could it happen? Yes. And, you know, I was just so happy when I really heard, and, you know, me and Grace are almost in cahoots about this. It's like, I really heard like, this is going to happen. They're doing it. And here we are. And you guys, awesome, just awesome commitment. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Clay. Sandy, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, totally agree with what David said. And yes, he knows who the people who wanted to kind of do that top-down thing were in the group. But I don't think there's any substitute for just, and I didn't put in nearly as many hours as some of these people did. Just, what is the word? Getting your hands dirty and just having to go through it. I don't think there are any shortcuts. And the commitment also, right, needs to be there. You can't be too cerebral about it. You just have to really feel it, like, we're going to do this and we're going to figure out a way to do it. That's all.
Awesome. Danny?
I just remembered, I have two words. One that I just remembered, yes, we had sociocracy and holocracy, but there was also duocracy, if you remember. And that's where the commitment, you know, it's the same thing. Giving preference to the people that were willing to do it at the time. And then, you know, the nuance can come later, and the equality, egalitarian, and all the rest, but honoring, deep bow to the people that are willing to do in this world, crazy world that we have of tension. The other personal word that I have that has kept me involved in the ways that I am is that I made a commitment to wanting EC to be sustainable. And boy, when you put that principle in, it gives me chills still. It's like it broadens out. It's a more meta position to take. Are we clamping onto something, or what's going to keep the, either in a conversation or in policies that we're making? What maintains this? What's sustainable? So that's my template. Sustainability.
Yep, and that is definitely baked into the Constitution. Zach?
Yeah, hey, my question is kind of in regards to what was said earlier about how I think Terry mentioned that the data, the numbers, analytics data was showing that there was a little bit of a drop off as the pandemic ended, as it sort of ended in different places at different times. Has there been much discussion or planning about what sort of these, you know, in real life, you know, in our meat suits kind of interactions, you know, might be possible or desired, and how they, you know, can build off of what's gone well so far with Emergent Commons and not cannibalize it or you know, ruin it in some way? Like, is there just is a magic that it's just we were sort of forced inside and to be together, or can it be supported by developing in-person elements as well?
Are you asking about branching off and making non-EC communities in person, Zach, or keeping Emergent Commons but also doing?
Just recognizing that there might be clusters, geographical clusters, or maybe an interesting city that people would be willing, like London for the last campfire of a Rebel Wisdom or something like that. Is there anything like that? You know, everybody wants to, you know, go to San Francisco to hang out with Clay. Like, have things like that, you know, started to be discussed?
We've been having playful conversations about doing an event, like I'd love a festival. I'm like, let's do an Emergent Commons festival. And I think that what I love about Emergent Commons is that we're not integral, we're not the STOA, we're not Rebel Wisdom, we're not NAS, we're not any of it, but we're all of it. And so we attract people that are stronger in each of these contexts. And I think that's powerful. I think that there's something there. And I think that there's no reason why we wouldn't meet in person. It has, like here in Rebel Wisdom, has been so beautiful to meet people in person, and Emergent Commons people that were here. I can only imagine it would be amazing. And I can see so many people in the States and Canada that could happen easier there. But I can see how, to me, Emergent Commons feels like it's doing a bridge between like communities that have a topic or a developmental component or whatever, because it is relational. So I can see us playing this role of like a relational hub, and eventually doing that in person. It would be I'd love that. So yes, from over here. And I see Mari nodding. So yeah, we can start, planning.
Yeah. And so, Peter, you had a question about platform, and I think that's actually important in the way that affordances are offered. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, there's a kind of practical curiosity on how Mighty Networks is of service to the development of this community. If someone wants to create it, do they jump on a Discord? Could they do the same thing on a Discord or a Slack, or is something special about Mighty Networks that sort of nudges it in the direction that Emergent Commons went in?
Kai.
Yeah, I'll say a little bit of yes and no to that. I think that the interface has been a little challenging, especially for new people coming in, although more and more people are getting used to the Mighty Networks interface. And that said, it's about to change. So I think it's December 8th, if I have that right. The entire interface is going to change, and hopefully in some good ways. But there are a couple of elements that were very, very conducive to what we're doing here, because we wanted to have this, one of the fundamental pieces here is creating these experimental opportunities and these little micro solidarity crews. And it does a beautiful job of that. So someone says, I've got an idea. I want a bunch of people to talk about raising rabbits. Great, you can start your crew about raising rabbits, and you can moderate it the way you want. You can do your experiments there. And then we have another space where we actually discuss how those experiments are going. And the platform really allows that in a generous way. I think navigating the space of those crews and various bits of content, I feel like could use a little work, but it's also something once you get used to it, it's a little bit easier. And I'm hoping this new iteration will make that easier still. I think that there's some pieces about how those crew spaces can be set up and the way they're kind of subordinate sub areas that I think is more than you could create, say, for example, with Slack and different channels, because there's so much more room for what you can do in those spaces.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, there's an events calendar, so you can put up events, and so you just click on the events tab and people can see upcoming events, and then it's in their time zone if they put in where they're located. So that makes it very user friendly for people looking to be involved in the synchronous meetings and the Zoom meetings. That is definitely affordance that Mighty Networks has, and I'm not familiar enough with Discord, but it seems like just visually, Discord's very, like, my eyes get lost in all the words. There's a lot of text, and it's very wide. And Mighty Networks to me it's much easier to actually read and to navigate. So I think some spaces could be set up similarly on Discord. Slack is, to me, it's more like Discord, and it's harder to follow threads and comments on threads. And so Mighty Networks also has, to me, allows affordances for asynchronous communication that is much easier to follow, with comments and then replies to comments. And it visually, it's indented, and it just has aesthetically, it's easier for my eyes to see. And I've heard that from other people too, that they have a more difficult time reading Discord or following Discord threads. But I know a lot of people prefer Discord. So I think part of it is like, what do you want to be able to offer? And how are the people that are offering that or who are coordinating that space, how do they want to, what are they comfortable with, and what do they want to be involved in maintaining? Then yeah, we were initially on Circle, and Circle was more similar to Mighty Networks than it was to either Discord or Slack. Yep, and there's a chat feature. That's that's good too, that members can private chat each other or group chat each other within the platform. And Tucker, you had a question? Do you want to ask it?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I have a trick question. I'm wondering what the blind spots of the community are that you can't see, but maybe we can shed some light onto them if there's any blind spots or collective shadows that emerge.
Can't see them, Tucker, the shadows.
I'd say that we have a polarity, like, for example, well, the ones we can't see, but the ones that we can see and still tricky is how to deal with, like, for example, trolls. Even though we haven't had many, like, there's this whole permeable membrane or non-permeable, there's a preference for, some of us have a bias in one side, some of us have a bias in another side, in tricky decision-making situations that and sometimes it's just, I don't know if that's considered a shadow, if we can see it. Maybe that's not considered a shadow, I don't know. But,
Hi.
I'll bring in a piece that I'll call it a shadow because it's been discussed a little bit, but you know, one of the things we talked about elders, and there's some real value about that. And I think, as Mari was talking about that earlier, naming that part of the value of elders is people who've been elders, been in this community for a long time and part of this history, elders in terms of life experience. But the shadow piece of that is that people with more space and time have undue power in a structure like this. So in a duocracy, the people who can do tend to be the people who are retired, who made enough money at some point that they don't have to work, and all of a sudden they have a little bit more power and influence in a situation like this. So I would call that definitely a shadow piece. We talked a little bit about, yeah.
And did I see your hand raised, Terry?
Yeah, the part about getting new members active has really been a challenge for us. And sometimes I fear maybe it's because we seem so cozy that can be off-putting to newcomers. The other thing that may be putting off is over expectations. Sometimes people are so excited when they arrive at our front door. I think they think we're going to change the world. And then they're disappointed when they find out, well, that hasn't happened yet. So we're struggling with that.
Yes, Arian?
Hi. Yeah, I don't know if it's shadow. It feels like there's so much goodness and kind of depth and authenticity and this, you know, curiosity and expertise that we want this kind of thing to be all over the place. I mean, we want this to grow, and it is a small community. You know, there isn't a ton of activity compared to what other social media options that are out there, and so it's not a shadow as much as, you know, it feels like we need more of that. You know, we're talking about how amazing it would be to be in person. I can't, you know, at this point right now afford or have the time to meet tons of people in person as much as that would be amazing to have some festival at some, you know, some location where we could all come together and hang out. But it would be great to just, you know, have more and more people have that same level of authenticity, depth, and sincerity and curiosity and desire to grow as individuals and culture at large. So.
Awesome, thank you. And on that note, I want to thank everyone for participating. The people that jumped in because you felt like the question was alive and you felt like you had something to contribute, and that's so much what Emergent Commons is about. So on that note, I want to hand it back to you, Peter. Deep thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mari. And yeah, thanks for everyone who came today and shared their thoughts. I wasn't expecting, I didn't know what to expect, but whatever happened here today exceeded my expectations. Yeah, was there any kind of info that you can send me that I can put on the video when I post it for how to get in touch? And I'll do that so you can look at the video description. And the thought I'm leaving with is, how can a place like the STOA be in relationship with a place like Emergent Commons? Because it'd be cool, like, we have like some kind of session of the STOA, and then boom, we settle into Emergent Commons, so I can direct people to it. For example, Daniel Schmachtenberger is coming next week, and he asked me to host a session beforehand to source questions for the session next week. Like, that's kind of like a job for Emergent Commons. It's like not a job, for me. I just like open up Zoom rooms. Yeah, perhaps we can even like play around on Sunday, because that's when where the sourcing question session happens. So let's be in relationship, stay in touch, and yeah, thank you everyone for coming to the STOA today.